Nanticoke leads Luzerne County in deaths and overdoses due to drugs. City leaders have come up with an effective plan to fight drug abuse, and they're willing to tell their story. That's our topic as we're set to go live with Call the Doctor.
Hello and welcome to a very special Call the Doctor here on WVIA, your member-supported public television station. My name is George Thomas and we are broadcasting live from City Hall in Nanticoke for a very special edition of this program. The story headlines that have appeared in the newspapers, well, they tell the story. 167 people have overdosed in 4 years in Nanticoke and 37 are dead. The city leads Luzerne County in deaths and overdoses, and there has been a staggering 511% increase in deaths in Luzerne County. Concerned members of Nanticoke bonded together over the bleak realization that they were in big trouble. As Officer Rivera put it, we cannot afford to be embarrassed about our drug problem any longer. The initiatives undertaken have included the cooperation of clergy, law enforcement, drug and alcohol professionals, attorneys, politicians, and citizens. Why put the negative drug spotlight on Nanticoke? Because it's a wonderful city with involved parents, treasured kids, and a community that's simply had enough. This is not just a program about a city called Nanticoke, it's about yours as well. And we have with us assembled citizens of Nanticoke here tonight. We'll be taking questions from them, and of course from you, when you call in our toll-free number on the bottom of your screen. Let's meet our panel of experts tonight that are going to tell us what they have been doing over the last several years to fight drugs in Nanticoke. Up first is Sergeant Kevin Gravera, and he is from the Nanticoke Drug Task Force. Also joining us is Mary Ann Girolan, the principal of the Greater Nanticoke Area High School. We have my good friend Carmen Ambrosino from Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services, and Jim Doherty from Marworth in Waverly. We have Dr. Margaret Jarvis from Marworth as well. And Don Williams from Clearbrook. He's also chairman of the Youth Task Force. Now, what makes Call the Doctor so unique is your ability to interact live with our area's biggest experts, and you could do that right now by simply dialing the toll-free number on the bottom of your screen and submitting your questions. And audience as well, I invite you anytime during the program, just raise your hand if you have a question. We'll be glad to take your question as well. First of all, thank you for showing up. What a great turnout. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you as well. Let's get right into it and go to my good friend Carmen Ambrosino. I did a little search, and you did an article about 1997, 1998, where you warned at that time that drugs were starting to infiltrate the Wyoming Valley. They were on the outskirts at that time. What has happened since then, and basically, how bad is it?
There's an epidemic in this county, and people need to hear that. I think people hear it, but they don't really listen, George, to the issues. There have been 224 OD deaths as it relates to Luzerne County since January 1st of 2001. That's absolutely staggering. Heroin's our number 2 problem in this county, and then cocaine, and then also marijuana. We have eight-year-old children, 9-year-old kids on clinical caseloads. And so the problem is an epidemic. It's a major problem. And I think far too often we look for the other guy or gal to come up with countermeasures to solve it. This is a community issue. And I want to commend, again, everyone from Nanticoke and the task force, because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're doing something about this drug problem before it basically overwhelms every one of us.
Officer Guevara, I'm going to ask you the same question, and then Principal Girolan. Officer Guevara, how bad is it, the drug problem in Nanticoke?
Well, I originally wrote a letter to the editor, which was published in 2004, and up until that point in time I had some figures that ended in 2003, started in 1999. And indeed, there were 37 people that had died from overdose of different drugs. Heroin, polypharmaceutical. What I mean by that is ingestion of various drugs, which include prescription pills. Some of it resulted from a doctor that ended up being arrested in Nanticoke, Dr. Manuel. He was responsible and arrested for a lot of those arrests. But yeah, the epidemic has gotten very bad. The crime has resulted as a direct result of people who are using and abusing drugs. And definitely, it's bad enough that you see a nice audience before you and you see a lot of people responding to it.
Principal Gerolin, you grew up in this area, you went to school in this area, you went to high school in this area, and now you're a principal of the high school in the area. What do you see?
All the drugs that were mentioned we have seen in our schools, and we have had problems with students who have been using drugs. One of the problems that we were looking at were ways to address the problems, find help for our students. And as you know, with any type of problem like this, the community does look to the schools and say, what are the schools doing? So in Nanticoke, we decided to take a very proactive approach. We were bringing programs in, we were sending our teachers up. Many of us were taking programs that Carmen was offering in the late to mid 1990s up at Wilkes College, and we were bringing those ideas in. So when we had an opportunity to work with people like Kevin and Don Williams with the Drug Task Force, some of us jumped at that. And we have several teachers and myself who've moved into that because now it gives us a chance to bring the community together with the law enforcement, with the clergy, with the school, and approach it from all different levels.
Jim Doherty from Marworth, I want to bring up on the screen right now, we have some information. This comes from the Luzerne County Alcohol Study Commission, and Greg Strephon is the chairman from that. And take a look at this. Drug and alcohol-related deaths in Luzerne County goes from 18 deaths in 1998 to 92 in 2002. That's a 511% increase in that 4-year period. Are we going to see that again in the next 4 years?
I certainly think that that's a distinct possibility if all communities don't begin to respond, as Carmen has been making reference to before, as Nanticoke has responded. I've been working in the drug and alcohol treatment field for close to 30 years. And it's interesting that over the course of that period of time, most community members respond to the availability of drugs and alcohol in the community by saying that it's really not that bad in my community. And it really takes a community that it has some level of insight, that is willing to acknowledge that there's a problem and that they're willing to take steps to fight that problem. So I think that in a broader community, if the community is not willing to take the steps that Nanticoke has done, yes, we could see that increase continue.
And we're going to get into all those steps about what Nanticoke is doing and tell the story as they are fighting drugs. Once again, if you'd like to call in, simply dial the toll-free number at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to have you on the program, and you could talk to our experts that we have here. Dr. Jarvis, I want to bring up another stat. This again comes from the Luzerne County Drug and Alcohol Study Commission. Luzerne County, this is in 2001, if we bring this up on the screen again, Luzerne-Lackawanna counties, 50 per 100,000 for the population overdosed. Now, that sounds shocking. Compared to the Bronx, New York, that was 18 out of $100,000. Once again, as you said, you think it's not that bad in our backyard, but it is.
Absolutely it is. And I would have to guess there may be several factors involved in that. One is that over the last 10 years on the East Coast, there has been an increase in the use of heroin as a primary drug of choice, particularly for younger people.
Why is that? Why is heroin the drug of choice?
Well, I'll tell you why. When the crack epidemic hit its peak, many of the people who were selling drugs found that their market had been cornered. So they started offering a purer form of heroin that could be used effectively by snorting it up the nose rather than having to jab a needle in your arm. And this was attractive to a lot of people who were just beginning to experiment with drugs. And so we now have a new generation of drug users who are using heroin, which is a very deadly drug and one on which it's very easy to overdose. The other thing that New York City may have that this community perhaps was lacking in the past are a lot of treatment programs specifically designed to address young people and to address those who are opiate dependent, because that can take some different tools than other kinds of drugs.
I'm going to get back to some more of that in just a second. Don Williams, chairman of the Youth Task Force. I'm reading here from the Citizens' Voice. This was the initial letter to the editor that started it all. And in there, Officer Guerrero was writing, said more than a year ago, this was written quite a bit ago, concerned members of our city bonded together over the bleak realization that they were in big trouble. They formed the Greater Nanticoke Area Task Force. They held their first meeting. About 30 people showed up. All of them were under the age of 20. 3 have died since then, between then and your next meeting. How shocking is that?
Unfortunately, it is. It's shocking, but then again, it's not because of the magnitude of the problem. It doesn't come as a surprise. We're losing young people. When you asked the question, how bad is the problem in this town? I don't have a lot of statistics, but what I will tell you is that we have families in this town that instead of going and watching their kids in ball games and in some of the activities, they're going to funeral homes and they're going to prisons to visit and see their children. And to me, as a citizen of this town, as a parent and a member of the task force, this is not acceptable. And I believe that we've tried to form a grassroots response to respond to this problem.
Again, we invite anybody in the studio audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll be glad to take your question. For you viewers at home, dial the toll-free number. We'll get you on the air here with your question. Carmen, I'm not being flippant, but you know, you can teach teenagers not to do drugs, not to smoke, not to try alcohol, on and on and on. But teenagers of every generation are curious. They want to try things. What makes it so different from, say, if a teenager goes out and maybe tries alcohol or tries some cigarettes compared to trying heroin for one time?
These chemicals own you with first use. They absolutely own you. They possess you, they overwhelm you, they consume you, they dictate your daily life to you. It's a total change of lifestyle once you put these chemicals in your system. They are that powerful. Heroin is 65 to 90% pure, not counting the cutting agents that are being added to these chemicals, so that even one hit of the heroin can be deadly. And so what people have got to clearly understand is there sometimes is no progression here. You're automatically hooked with the first usage.
So that's the part I want to emphasize. You said that before. It's not like trying a beer and the next morning you have a hangover. The first time you try heroin, that's it. Your brain is rewired and your life has changed from then on. It's not like you want to do heroin. You have to at that point.
It's a brain disease. The Drug Enforcement Agency has determined that heroin, as it relates to northeastern Pennsylvania, is the most potent and most powerful in all the United States. That's a message there. And what it's cut with, as I mentioned earlier, George, is also critical because we're in the synergy. Whenever we take more than one chemical into the system at the same time, you're into synergy, the snowball going downhill. We did a psychological autopsy of over 200 OD deaths in Luzerne County several years ago. The average amount of chemicals in the bloodstream of the deceased was anywhere from 3 to 4. So the misconception that addicts are only wed to one specific drug, that's false. They are using a whole multiple of chemicals.
Just to drive the point home further for people that might be watching, is this trend, if nothing is done, is this trend going to go away?
No, one of the things I would say to listeners, and they need to really listen to this one, the greatest fear that any parent or any grandparent has in this world is to lose their child. And if I asked every parent, how could that happen? They would probably say from terrorism or foreign wars. Well, the top 3 killers of our youth in this country from 16 through 21 are car accidents and murders and suicides. The greatest culture, those are our top 3 killers, and 75% of each and every one of those are chemical dependency driven.
And also, your own task force came up and said 85% of all crime is directly related to drugs as well. Why is that?
Because when we use chemical, it's going to alter how we think, how we feel, how we perceive, how we we're going to see individuals that ordinarily do not act out. When they take a chemical, you're going to see rage and you're going to see them get involved in crime.
Let's go back to Kevin Rivera again at home. If you'd like to call in, feel free. The toll-free number is on the bottom of your screen, and we'll be taking questions from anybody in the audience if they wish to. All right, Kevin, you were there. You saw it. What made you decide that, hey, I've got to be the person to start something?
Well, just knowing, being from a small town, you know personally the individuals that you're dealing with. And just to touch on a little bit of what Carmen had said, you had asked why do you suppose the statistic and the percentage is 85% of all crimes a direct result of drug use? Simply put, oftentimes you'll find young people that start out by stealing money from their parents in the home. The parents might overlook that. Then you might find a young person going into a store, stealing something, selling that for drugs. As they begin to become consumed by these substances, they can't control themselves to the point that they would do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Then you have them going into rob pharmacies to try and steal from them. Nanticoke City has 4 pharmacies. Within the past 2 years, there's been an attempted burglary. When you group them together, burglaries and attempted robberies, there have been a total of 9. 4 pharmacies, 2 years, a total of 9. So I just wanted to touch on that point for 1 second, George. And then getting back to your initial question.
You saw this firsthand. What made you make the statement to yourself that now I've got to do something?
I was personally overwhelmed by seeing people that I knew who were dying in front of me. People I grew up with. I went to homes and I'd seen them overdose. I'd seen them in a physical condition where, they were lying before me. Their bodies were blue. Their lips were blue. They couldn't breathe. They were deceased. I've seen people brought back by Narcan. I've seen families destroyed. I've seen parents take their own lives because they couldn't deal with their child's condition.
So at that point, you came up with the idea of starting the drug task force. Tell us how it started quickly and then how it has snowballed in just a few years to where it is now.
Sure. I went to meet a friend of mine, Father Langan, from St. Francis Church in Nanticoke, and he agreed with me and had a similar take on the problem in Nanticoke. And what we had done is send out flyers to various religious organizations in the town. Didn't matter what denomination. We contacted everybody. We contacted the school district. Of course, me being in the police department, they got involved. So we all decided to have a meeting, which did take place at St. Francis. We had some members of the medical community, the legal community. We had people from Luzerne, Wyoming County Mental Health, and they all, of course, Wyoming Valley Drug and Alcohol. They all offered some insight into how we could approach this. And what we were finding is we created a common bond of communication that one single entity in and of itself can't handle this problem directly and have a significant impact. Here in Nanticoke, we've allowed ourselves to have immediate contact with anybody in any of these agencies that an individual might need. And having that at your disposal is something that's a force to be reckoned with against this drug problem.
So is that what makes it truly unique? Because all cities have some type of anti-drug enforcement, anti-drug effort. Is that what makes it truly unique and why it's working here?
It is working here, and I would have to say yes. It's the first time that the citizens have stepped up and had enough that I think they didn't wait for an answer, necessarily from government. They didn't wait for the next latest and greatest release from any particular entity. We've just had enough as a community, and we had a meeting. It was attended by well over 300 people at St. Francis Church. So a lot of the folks in town share our opinion.
In the beginning, I mentioned about how many overdoses there were, and that is, I believe, from 1998 to 2002, 147 overdoses, 37 deaths. What has happened since then? Has that still continued, or are you say you're making progress? Are you really making progress?
Oh, yes, we are making progress. When you hear about an overdose, as Carmen had put it, a classification of an overdose in and of itself is when a person consumes more chemicals and chemicals that weren't prescribed to them that their body can't handle, basically. There's a more clinical definition that I'll defer to the medical doctors here. But at any rate, those resulting from death may result from a suicide. There might be a person who's addicted to something and deliberately take their own lives with that substance because they can't handle their addiction anymore. Well, that's an overdose because of that addiction.
Principal Geroldin, what are you, again, all principals in every high school across this country, I'm sure, is doing something, trying something. What makes your efforts in conjunction with this task force different, and why is it working?
What's different here is because we have so many different types of people involved. If you just have the educational community doing things, then we're out in a vacuum trying to affect things. But when we put a program in and then we deal with the drug task force, we're calling in people that are in the medical community, we're calling in law enforcement, we're able to call on legal experts. By using all the volunteers and all the unique talents that they bring to our drug task force, we can approach things from a multifaceted way of looking at things, and it's not just limited by what we educators think or what we see. What I may observe in the school and in the classroom, when I discuss it with Kevin or call on some of the other police officers here in town, they can add things to it that I may not have noticed. When we start putting our efforts together and now we bring in our medical consultants and we talk to some of our business people, now we see a bigger picture. And I think that's what the uniqueness of our task force does for us. It gives us a broader view of what we're looking at.
There are people out there watching tonight that will say and ask the question, you're the principal of the high school and the teachers are there. The teachers aren't doing enough.
Well,
and that's why there's drugs in high school.
Okay. We don't provide the drugs in the high school. I had a professor a long time ago who gave us an assignment to go home and make a 5-minute speech on how we as the principal are going to address the drug problem in our schools. And after we did it, he gave us all an F. He told us that our problem is we were taking responsibility for a problem that belongs to the community as a whole, not just to the schools, not to the educators. So we need to bring in more people. As much as we can do, we need the parents. We see their students 7-8 hours a day. They have them the other part of the day. We need to have coaches working with us. We need to have all of the people that are looking at these students. Hillary Clinton says it takes a village. Well, in our case, it's a town. And we need our town to look at our students and say, this is where our kids are at. Not just my faculty, not just the elementary faculty. We're looking for more people because we want to address it in a very broad way and therefore get better results.
I had a concerned citizen come up to me right before the show, and she can't be here, and she said, you know what, just tell them to go in there with the drug-sniffing dogs, shut down the school, and sniff every locker and you'll get the drugs out of there, but they won't do it because they're scared.
I'll tell you right now, they're not in the lockers. One of the things we do is check lockers. We don't tell students when, where, how, why. We check lockers. Honestly and truly, if students are going to bring drugs into the school, they're going to carry them on their person because it is too dangerous to put them in the locker. They know that's not their locker. That locker belongs to the school. We've had dogs in. We will have dogs in again. But that is not going to solve the problem because the dog can't go up and sniff the student. We do sometimes get students, and when we do catch someone with drugs, it's because they're acting in an erratic way or because someone offers us something. And then we do go and do everything we can. Generally speaking, we start with the parent, with law enforcement. We make the parents take their students in and have them tested. And we go through the whole gamut of what needs to be done. But again, the dogs are one idea. We've had them in several times. They found nothing in the lockers.
Let's go to our phones right now. Again, if you're calling in from home, feel free to call with your question at the toll-free number on the bottom of your screen. And our audience is here, and we'll get somebody here from the audience to raise their hand, sure enough. Let's go to our first caller, and we have Edward, who's calling in from Schuylkill. Edward, welcome to the program.
How you doing?
Very good. Your question, please.
Yeah, I live in a small community in Schuylkill County here, and my biggest concern is that with the funding for police officers in the town, we only have a part-time officer. And I could take a walk from my house to across town, and I have to go through alleys. Well, since the kids have nowhere to hang out in this town, they hang out in the alleys. Well, you can see them. They're either smoking marijuana, drinking, so on. My biggest concern is how can you direct these kids to get off the corners or out of the alleys and into something positive, since we are a small town and the backbone of the town, the people that started the town, that are not living here anymore, and we're low income, and we get people from other areas that move in, and there's not really a community.
Edward, good question. Actually, a two-part question, and Officer Guevara, I'm going to send it your way. One, is money, throwing money at the problem, is that the solution? And two, what are you doing, your task force doing, to give the children and the teenagers of Nanticoke something to do?
Well, first of all, the gentleman mentioned that a lot of his teenagers are on the streets in the alleys and doing things like that. But if you listen to him carefully, he also said there's only one part-time policeman on. Now think about that. People within that community to make a difference, I don't know what the population is of that town, they have to rise up and hold their officials accountable and make sure they have some police presence. Number two, what the task force is doing to try and alleviate some of that burden and boredom is we run a youth center, and of course Don Williams is the head of our youth group, which is the youth task force.
Don, you want to explain that a bit?
One of the things that we, as the task force, believe is the real power to be reckoned with here is our youth. That we believe a great deal of the solutions lie with them. We did organize some of the young people at the very outset of this, and we reached out to them and asked them what kind of a town do they want. because we believe that, as adults we can talk about the drug problem and give some direction, but the people who interface with the users every day are the young people, and they have far more influence about this problem than we do. And so what we did was we organized them into a youth task force, and as Officer Guevara said, we have a rec center running. We have a lot of programs, Teen on Teen, where they have some encounter groups, and Girls Night In, where the young ladies get together and talk about women's problems. But the bottom line here is that we have a great deal of faith in our youth. And we've handed them the power to say, what kind of a city do you want? And you want a city that's going to be a fertile soil to grow drug abuse and drug problems? Or do you want to make a statement as young people about that and define what kind of a town and future you want? And we're very pleased that our young people, many of them are here tonight, responded to this and have taken a very active role.
For the studio audience, or for the home audience, you weren't here, but they had a meeting here just before we went on the air. I believe there were some Penguins that were here from the Penguins hockey team. They were talking to the task force. It was really nice. Let's go back to the phones again. Let's say hello to Susan calling in from Nanticoke. Susan, welcome to Call the Doctor.
Thank you.
Your question, please.
Well, I want to commend everybody for what they're doing in our town. And I'd like to know, you have some young people in the audience, I'd like to know their opinion, how it's helping them stay away from drugs and the benefits that they're getting out of the task force.
Let me send that up to our panel and up to Carmen again, because we can't really poll the audience. Carmen?
I think the benefit, if you take a look at the issue of chemical dependency, it's not the drug. And I think that's where we miss the mark. It's what is basically causing the young person to use chemicals. We're concerned with bird flu right now across our world. Any disease starts with the individual and then affects the family and then the community and then the state and then the nation and then the world. There's no difference as it relates to chemical dependency. How do our children benefit here? We strengthen our family units. We spend more time with our kids. We have dinner with them. We talk with them, open communication. We volunteer with them in the community. We set standards of conduct in the home. We develop a code of ethics by which all family members live. We recreate as a family. We start to challenge our youngsters to identify all the God-given coping mechanisms that they have. We help them with the problem-solving skills. I believe that those are the byproducts that these young people are going to get as they relate to the task force. They're going to see caring adults who give a darn about who they are, and we're going to honor them and respect them and dignify them and help them to develop a strong self-esteem, because the number one common denominator for why anyone picks up chemicals is they don't feel good about who they are, and that's where we need to shore it up.
Carmen, thank you. We have a question from one of our studio, or people in our studio audience. Your first name?
Bob.
And you're from Nanticoke?
Yes, I am.
And what's your question to the panel?
I guess it was mainly for Officer Guevara. On my street here in town, it was obvious there was drugs being dealt out of a house a few doors up. You know, a car would pull up, somebody run out, 30 seconds later the car's gone. I mean, everybody kind of knew it. And in all fairness, the police did, investigate and respond, but it seemed to take a heck of a long time, like maybe years, to shut it down. I just was wondering why why something could have been done earlier.
Why does it, thank you for your question. Officer, why does it take so long once people know that there's a drug problem or drug house? Why does it take so long to shut it down?
It would be wonderful if we could immediately, Paul, when you make a call or anyone makes a call like that, if we could immediately walk right in the door, grab the drugs, and arrest these people. But as many of your listeners in the audience knows, an investigation is lengthy. There are certain obstacles the law enforcement community faces when they're trying to investigate a drug house. You have to develop information, you have to develop informants, you have to go through a step-by-step process, and you're limited by finance. So the main reason why it does take a long time is because you need probable cause to make an arrest. Without that, you can't go. And some people don't realize that. They call in, they say, I've got a drug house. They want an immediate solution to that. Well, we're empowered to enforce the laws that the legislature has written. And in some cases, our hands are tied.
We have a lot more coming to you live from City Hall in Nanticoke on this special edition of Call the Doctor on WVIA. Right now we're going to take our halftime break, and then we'll be back to give you some more information on how you can get information about the efforts that's going on here in Nanticoke.
Childhood obesity is a national epidemic, and it's a problem in northeastern Pennsylvania and the central Susquehanna Valley as well. Nearly 40% of our elementary school children are overweight, putting them at risk for serious health problems and shorter lives. WVIA and Geisinger Health System have partnered to address the obesity crisis. Geisinger created a program to teach young children how to make healthy choices when it comes to fitness and nutrition. WVIA, your public service media organization, will distribute the lessons to teachers in our 22-county region through WVIA's interactive television programs. Teachers can choose to build on these lessons through exercises, conversations, and take-home assignments that encourage partnerships with parents. This program was created to empower teachers and parents to talk with kids about healthy living. This program is an outreach campaign as a part of WVIA's Call the Doctor series. There is no cost to districts to participate. We believe this program has the potential to become the national model for school-based education in the fight against childhood obesity. For more information, contact Dr. Candace Ayers at Geisinger, 570-271-6149. Geisinger Health System and WVIA, partnering to work with parents and school districts to improve the quality of health education in northeastern Pennsylvania and the central Susquehanna Valley.
Welcome back to the special edition live broadcast from City Hall in Nanticoke on Call the Doctor on your public television station, WVIA. My name is George Thomas. For more information about the efforts of the Greater Nanticoke Area Drug Task Force, you can go to their website, which is www.nanticokecity.com. Or you can also go to the National Clearinghouse for Drug and Alcohol Abuse at www.health.org. I'd like to also mention, if you'd like to, you can go to the website of the Greater Nanticoke Area High School, and just to show you, if we bring this up on the screen, how involved they are, they have a link right at the bottom to the Greater Nanticoke Area Drug Task Force. So on that day, when you're checking to see if there's a little snow in the weather forecast and maybe you might have school canceled, check that out as well. We're halfway through. We invite, of course, your questions calling in through this program simply by dialing the toll-free number here at the bottom of the screen. Let me reintroduce our panelists to you very quickly. We have with us Sergeant Kevin Grivera from the Nanticoke Drug Task Force. Also, Mary Ann Girolan, the principal of the Greater Nanticoke Area Task Force. We have Carmen Ambrosino from the Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services. Jim Doherty from Marworth and Waverly. We have Dr. Margaret Jarvis from Marworth as well, and Don Williams from Clearbrook, and he is the chairman of the Youth Task Force. Let's go right back to the phones again. We have Donna in Wilkes-Barre who's been waiting patiently for your question. Donna, welcome to Call the Doctor.
Hi, and good evening.
Good evening.
I was wondering, as a resident of Wilkes-Barre, do we also have a drug task force?
Very good question. Let me go to Carmen on that one.
There's a drug task force for Luzerne County, which includes a lot of individuals from the Wilkes-Barre area. Our facility, again, is from the Wilkes-Barre area, and we're a major part of that task force. So yes, there is representation, although it's not called a task force that's representing Wilkes-Barre City.
There was a one article, and this is the drug court, and I'm going to have you comment on this as well. This, again, was in the Citizens' Voice on Monday, October 31st. They said in there, the idea of a drug court is to sentence nonviolent offenders to intensive treatment programs rather than sending them to prison. It would rehabilitate some people and would reduce some of the overcrowding in the prison. The snag is that the application for a grant to start up the drug court was not approved. And that was an initiative, by the way, by Luzerne County Commissioner Greg Skrepenak. Can you update us on that? Where are we at that? Will that go through, and is that realistic that that's really going to help? Yes, it's the second year in a row that the application has been denied by the federal government, and that's unfortunate because our county's drug problem is a major problem. Out of 67 counties, it certainly ranks in the top 5. And to turn it down 2 years in a row, but
If you know Greg Skripanak and the Drug Task Force, they are very dogged. This idea will happen. Mike Donahue from Drug and Alcohol has allocated, again, some dollars as it relates to drug courts. So there will be, George, some semblance of a drug court in 2006. And yes, A, it's going to take away some of the overcrowding, and B, it's going to move more people into therapy as opposed to incarceration for the use of chemicals as opposed to sale of chemicals.
We have several questions from our audience. And your first name?
Sue.
And you're from?
I am a former resident of Nanticoke. I live in Arizona right now. I have two questions, actually. One for Principal Girolan. You mentioned that the school is actively doing things for the students. I would be interested to know what is, or if there is, a curriculum that you're doing in your high school or the school district in general. And my second question is really to the panel. You're advocating rehabilitation. What are those rehabilitation or mental health services that are available for the students in this area?
Okay, we work with drugs through the curriculum in several different areas. One of the things that we're very fortunate, and this comes through Carmen Ambrosino's agency, is we have Debbie Reddy, who is a certified drug and alcohol counselor who does counselor education with our students. She also works with our teachers. We also do drug programs in some of our other courses, our health courses, our history, our sociology courses. We bring in a number of speakers. When we see a particular problem, we try to address that problem. A few years ago, we felt that heroin was a problem in the high school, and we did bring in several different programs for our students, and we even invited parents to come in for the programs later in the day. So we are trying to do the programs in the schools. We are trying to be very proactive, and again, looking at what happens and when it happens and trying to tailor that to it. We've recently had some people in from the district attorney's office, and we are setting up more programs along those lines.
Carmen, you want to take the second part?
Yeah, George, our task force just did a Communities that Care survey. There were 3,800 of the students from Luzerne County school districts, 10 of them, from 6th, 8th, and 10th grades. And they were asked, what are the risk factors as it relates to your life? They did not identify the schools as the problem, but they did put the onus of the problem on the community and the family. And these were 3,800 of our youngsters who were polled. When a child has a drug problem, it does not become a school problem, it's a family problem and a problem for all of the community. It's only a school problem when those chemicals are being used on site at the school district. I've been doing this for 33 years. I get around every single school as it relates to Luzerne County. Their report card, from my standpoint, is an A+ on chemical dependency prevention and education.
Jim Doherty from Marworth. I want to bring up on the screen again, this comes from the Luzerne County Drug Task Force on their report. And it mentions this: on average, children have their first contact with drugs when they're 11 years old. Is that getting younger? I don't ever remember reading it.
Absolutely.
Being 11.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the scary thing, a part of that statistic, is that the National Institute of Drug Abuse, in looking at age of first use for marijuana, the younger the age of first use for marijuana, there is a twofold increase in the probability that that young person is going to be perhaps be using opiates. There's a threefold increase in the potential use of cocaine, and there's a fourfold increase in the use of other drugs, including hallucinogens. Clearly, age of first use is a tremendous predictor about whether or not you're going to have troubles later on in life. And so the National Institute of Drug Abuse talks about between the ages of 12 and 17, and we've identified a problem here where the age of first use is 11. That's got to be a poor prognosis for those individuals unless there's effective intervention.
Let's go back to the phones again. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Professionally, I'm the clinical director of an inpatient adolescent rehab in Clearbrook. And you know, the ages of 11 and 12, you see when we do the intakes with the young people that come in, and a lot of people coming in are 15, 16, and 17 years old. Started with marijuana and alcohol around the age of 11 and 12, but then in taking a look at it, it has progressed by the time they're 15 and 16 to be multiple substance abuse to include all types of hallucinogens, experimentation with cocaine, into heroin, multiple substances, so it doesn't stay there. You're not looking at somebody that's 16, 17 in a rehab and saying, are you still using marijuana and alcohol exclusively? It's gone far down the tracks from that.
We're going to continue to ask for your phone calls by dialing the toll-free number at the bottom of your screen. Let's take our next phone caller right now. Let's welcome Bob from Wilkes-Barre to Call the Doctor. Bob, how you doing?
Hi. Yes. Here's my dilemma. I am very much in love with a woman who is both a narcotic as well as alcohol. And I don't know what to do. I've met Carmen on several occasions at book signings and things, but I don't know what to do as far as she is concerned. If I do anything positive, I know she's going to be in prison. If I don't do anything positive, I know she's going to be dead.
Thank you for the phone call, Dr. Jarvis. You could hear it in his voice.
I know, it's so sad. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard these sort of tormented stories from families and spouses of folks who are addicted. There's several things that are very important to realize in a situation like that, and one is that you ultimately are not responsible for the health and well-being of the addicted person.
Where can you go to get help?
Al-Anon is a great place, and Al-Anon meetings are easy to find. They're free. There are a lot of folks out there who've been down this road and can help you out. There are also a number of therapists in the area who are very good at addressing these issues as well.
Let's take another question from our studio audience. Your first name?
Hello, my name is Denise.
And you're from?
Kingston. Actually, I was born and raised in Nanticoke. And when I read the papers, I was definitely appalled about our town, and I am sick over it. This is definitely an epidemic. And I came here today to, of course, get more involved. I have a lot of small nieces and nephews growing up in this town, of course. And I guess I want to hear more about solutions. And by the way, Mr. Drillin, I heard a lot of good things about the task force, about you from my friend Al. And I'm so glad Clearbrook is here. I almost called Nick today to say, please join us over here, but someone's here. And Carmen, thank you so much. I finally had the pleasure of meeting you. I guess my question is, it sounds wonderful, the task force. However, I think Carmen, what you had shared earlier, it just, to me, it was like, okay, he's absolutely right on what he's talking about here. We have these teenagers and children addicted to heroin, addicted to marijuana. Alcohol, too, is big. We got to think about that. And yes, I definitely agree. It all comes from family issues, school issues, peer pressure is big, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, you have this task force. Yeah, they're going there to meet with each other, to maybe some fellowship, have fun, talk. But recovery is an inside job. And I have not heard anyone mention anything about a 12-step program. In Nanticoke right now, there is only one, and it's on Sunday nights. We need 4 or 5 in this city, and there's so many churches here right now that can open up the doors for AA and NA and get help for these people. This is an epidemic.
Good question, Officer Rivera. Let's get down to brass tacks.
If I
good
may.
program. What's it doing?
The drug task force did see the need that you're talking about, Miss, and you're incorrect. There are 3 12-step meetings that I'm aware of that do occur in Nanticoke, and they're available to those who might want to attend those. They could call the task force hotline. We'll give the location, or they could contact their local NA or AA. But we basically facilitated the provisioning of space for additional 12-step programs. That is one thing that the task force did see a need for, and we agree with you. So there are now 3. I'm not going to disclose that. If there's an individual that does need to attend a 12-step program, they could contact our task force or their local branch of AA or NA.
One of the things that was very specific was that we were looking to establish some programs that were for the younger people, because one of the complaints that we would have with students that were coming back to us with aftercare was that the programs that they were finding weren't their peer group. And an 18-year-old does not want to go to an NA or an AA program with a 50-year-old. And one of the things with the task force is some of them that we have established are more peer appropriate for our students or our former students, but for our people who are 25 and below. So again, those are the type of programs that we've established with our group.
Doctor, you'd like to comment?
Yes, I like your question very much, because I think what it brings to my mind is that even with the wonderful work that's been being done right in this instant, it's not going to make this disease disappear. This disease has a strong genetic basis, and all of the family work in the world is not necessarily going to keep everybody from becoming addicted. So having things that are ongoing in the community, and the 12-step programs are a terrific source and something that is always available. And that will be there when the next generation, these kids, grandchildren, are having their problems, because they will. They will.
Let's go back to our live studio audience here. And your first name, please?
Andrea.
And you're from Nanticoke?
I'm a former Nanticokean. I'm from Wilkes-Barre now.
And your question for the panel?
Since I've been here, the only thing that I've been hearing about is children, teenagers. I am now 21 years old, and there's people that I went to high school with who have nothing but drug problems. And me, myself, I'm trying to help these people, but they don't want to listen to me. And at the same time, they're in denial about themselves. And I have a friend of mine who recently was in a 30-day program 8 hours away, and I don't think she got the help that she needed. She had denied the problem to me for like 9 months. Is there any drugs that actually have side effects or different indications that I, as a friend, would be able to notice to help her? That I would have known, I would have known before these 9 months when she finally came out and told me that she had this problem.
What are some of the signs that people should be looking out for?
There are a lot of things you can look for, and the first signs are not necessarily so much related to the pharmacology of the specific drugs as much as just behavior. And these would be common to alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, problems with gambling, problems with sex, all kinds of things. Isolation. These are they start losing interest in the things that normally interest them. They seem unlike their normal selves. They're perhaps crankier, more irritable, that kind of thing. They're not as available. They're spending more time by themselves. Those are good behavioral signs that somebody's having a problem. Each drug of abuse, whether it's alcohol, cocaine, or marijuana, whatever, they all have slightly different effects on the human body. And if you are adept at seeing them, you might. But oftentimes what a person who hasn't been trained for it is going to be able to see is simply that somebody's not acting in their normal way. That they're either hyped up, or they're very groggy, or they're saying things that seem very inappropriate for them. Yes, there are other physical signs and symptoms, but they're very diverse, and it takes some training sometimes to be able to see it.
George, one thing, if I may add.
Yeah, go ahead, then we'll go back to Jim.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, excuse me, Jim. But the young lady had mentioned about she didn't think her friend got the help that she needed. Oftentimes, and I know a lot of addicts, I've arrested a lot of addicts, I have a lot of addicts that are friends, I know a lot of people in recovery. A lot of times, you may find that it's not the help she needed she didn't get. It may not have been the help that she wanted. Sometimes when an addict goes to a facility like Clearbrook or Marworth, they have expectations beyond what these facilities are going to offer them, that they should offer them within the form of regular treatment. Addicts can be very selfish people, and it's a disease that would compel them to want more or want something different.
Jim, I'd like you to comment. As we're doing that, I'd like to bring up on the screen a watch list for parents, some of the things that the Dr. Jarvis was talking about.
The officer just said everything that I was going to say in response to the young lady, and perhaps more eloquently. I think that most treatment is good treatment in our state and in our country. The willingness of someone to accept treatment and to be motivated for treatment. We're talking about a very cunning and baffling disease, and the willingness to accept treatment is always an uphill struggle. There's one other thing that I'd like to comment on, and Carmen has made reference to this twice, and I don't think it can be overemphasized enough. One of the things that when we talk about here is that frequently enough we start to look for solutions externally. So what is the school going to do about it? What's Carmen Ambrosino's program going to do about it? What's Clearbrook going to do about it? What's my family physician going to do about it? And I think that's the wrong place to look. And Carmen has mentioned a couple of times about families. And I can't begin to emphasize enough the importance of family in helping young people toe the line, have some level of control and structure over their free time. Because if somebody's hanging out in an alley and they're 15 and 16 years of age, my question is, what do the parents know about their activities at that particular time in terms of holding them accountable as well? And so I think we have to go back to that which seems the simplest, and that is dealing with family members, and then we begin to work out. And I think Carmen said it very well. It's not a school problem until the problems start to move out in concentric circles from the family to the community at large.
Doctor, your comment?
And to build on that, it's not just teenagers and it's not just children. If somebody's going to be treated effectively, it's really hard to do that without involving the family. And if family members are still drinking, if there's still a lot of arguing and fighting and whatnot going on in the household, it's really hard to get sober and stay sober. And so there's a lot of emphasis that needs to be made on having families involved.
Let's go back to our phones right now, and we have an anonymous caller calling in from my hometown where I grew up, before I adopted Nanticoke, and that's from Wilkes-Barre. Your question, please, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening. When a person who is addicted to drugs is incarcerated, is there any opportunity for rehabilitation for that person during the incarceration period?
Sergeant Guevara, I'll go to you on that one.
One comment that I do want to make, and it's in conjunction with this caller and a caller that we heard a little while ago, is they wanted to know what they should do when an individual is committing crimes or is going to die. You have to hold these people accountable, or they'll never hold themselves accountable. If they never hold themselves accountable, they're never going to beat this thing. And insofar as what sort of rehabilitation is available through the prison, I know different prison systems, whether they be state and Luzerne County, have various groups, and I think they have NA meetings and AA meetings, but I think I'll defer that to Carmen. You might know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, there's a facility in Luzerne County Prison with regard to community counseling services. They do assessment evaluation of any inmate with a chemical dependency problem, and if they are going to be getting out in the next 30 days, they will link them with outpatient providers in the community. Also, I think what's very significant is while the individual's in prison, the family treatment can begin. And every single chemical dependency program has a family component. Just call any one of us and we will plug in. So yes is the answer. Rehabilitation can begin along with the person being in terms of in the jail.
Officer Guevara, you wrote in an article. I'd like to bring this up on the screen. Read the quote and get your comment on this so people get a little bit a better idea what the Drug Task Force is about. You said, Officer Guevara said there is a good majority of kids involved in the program who are not necessarily at risk and do not have drug problems. Diversity is a key element of the program, so it's not just kids that are in trouble with drugs in your program.
No, certainly not. And I said this before and I'll say it again. It's very easy to tell your kid to say no, but if you don't give them an alternative to drug use, if you don't give them, and they may not necessarily be interested in sports as traditionally offered by high school, you have to provide alternatives, and you have to permit everybody within the community to participate, no matter who they are. You have to make them feel welcome. So diversity, anyone's welcome within our group, with the Youth Task Force and the Adult Task Force.
We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to get a bunch of questions from the audience here. They've been patient. Your name?
Brett.
And you're from Nanticoke?
Yes. And your question? My question is that when I'm a walker from Nanticoke, when I walk to school, I walked a certain way, and there are all these people on the street, and they're always smoking and doing these bad things, like passing marijuana. And like when I walk by, they always say these nasty comments to me. I'm wondering why nothing's being done about this.
It isn't that nothing's being done about it. It's that Nanticoke has a police force. The police force serves 10,800 people. I'm not going to say how many policemen are on at one time, but what I will tell you, son, is that we receive an awful lot of calls a day. There are sometimes we get a priority call. We do patrol the school zone, and we try to handle it as best we can. But right now, we are short-staffed. We can't patrol the way that we'd like to aggressively. And something like that, if no one calls and tells us about it, we can't be everywhere. So we need to hear that from guys like you. If you want to be anonymous, you call, or anyone else, and we'll be glad to respond to it.
Let's take another question from the audience. Your first name?
Larry.
And you're from Nanticoke?
Yes. I was just wondering, I mean, I know the committee's doing real good because I know Don, I know Kevin, but what could we as citizens do to help the task force? Is there anything that we could do or get involved? I mean, a lot of people here, parents, grandparents, I mean, what could we do to help you?
Well, first of all, Larry, if you know someone that has an addiction, you can refer them to us in a sense, and we would definitely be able to refer them to the appropriate agency, whomever it might be. You, as members of the community of Nanticoke, again, you hold your relatives and the ones that are dear and near to you responsible for their own actions. Make sure that if they commit a crime, don't let them get away with it. Make sure you introduce them to the judicial system to try and further get them into treatment. And insofar as that, the community's been overwhelmingly supportive of us. Financially, they've embraced this group. You people have been doing more than your fair share, so thank you for that to all of you in Nanticoke.
A couple minutes left. Jeannie has a quick question. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. I want to thank all of you people here. I think you're doing a remarkable job. One day I was on the computer. I went into finding about drug rehabilitation, and I came across a place that I think a lot of people should look at. It's a recovery center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dr. Joan Larson has it, and she has 2 very good books out. And she feels nutrition plays a vital statistic on getting these people well. So if anybody's interested, just get on the computer or go to the bookstore and ask for a book by Dr. Joan Larson.
Good comment. Good.
I know the time is running out here. One of the, in terms of suggestions for anybody in any community, there's I think a very powerful, very short commercial. It's not actually a commercial, it's a sponsorship spot on WVIA radio, on NPR that I hear every once in a while. It's sponsored by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which is a federal office that reports directly to the President of the United States. And it's entitled Parents, the Anti-Drug. And it talks about the importance of parental involvement, parents asking questions, not being intimidated by your children with regards to what they're doing, where they're going, and how they're doing it. And so I think it still comes back to parents.
Kevin Rivera, last question. We have about 30 seconds left. Are we winning or are we losing?
Nanticoke has had a significant improvement over the years. There is no question about that. While crime, continues to be consistent in how it is, you do not see the number of fatalities that I was looking at in 99, 2000, 2001. They're not here like they were.
All right, thank you very much. I would thank our panel members for being here tonight. Nanticoke, thank you for showing up here tonight, and we certainly appreciate them. Sergeant Rivera, Marianne Girolan, Carmen Ambrosino, Jim Doherty,